Hey everybody, and welcome to Robin's house. Today I'm working with the Heart Thin Cut, Floral Heart Thin Cut, but more than anything, these background thin cuts with all these intricate details in them, sometimes running them through your Big Shot or whatever material you have can be a little tricky. So I have some tips for you. So I'm going to take my Big Shot and I'm going to run my heart through my Big Shot. And I go up one way and then I come back the other way. That way it goes through twice and catches anything it didn't catch the first time, but also brings it back to where I'm working. So I'm going to take it out and it has left all of the shapes on the thin cut and you have to punch them out. But there is a trick for that. I think if you run your thin cut through with wax paper, sometimes after you've used your thin cut a bunch of times, I don't know if it gets gummy or if it just, the static isn't working or something, but I just take my wax paper and I go ahead and run it through. And then I move it and I take it and I run it one more time. No, I'm not leaving myself any room to do it on the other one, but that's okay. It's the same idea. Okay, and then I am going to have to pick out some of the wax paper from these shapes. And that'll take a second. So I'm going to just stop for a moment. Now, hopefully, since I have wax paper on there, I won't have to poke out so many of the holes. So let's try this again on my cardstock. Running it through once and running it through back. Now it came right off. I don't actually even have I have nothing to punch through on my thing. And almost all of it ended up on my thing, and I do have to punch a few out. But sometimes that's just the way it goes. But there are a lot fewer, and these ones are punching out much faster. So then the idea is, let's try it on some of those other card-based ones. This one is a little trickier. So when I go to run this one through, these whole card front ones don't always press all the way through. And I have found, and then see almost all of it is needing to be punched, and it's also not all the way through. So on these big card front ones, I find it best to add some shims to my thing. So I always keep, you can see right now I have, how many do I keep? So I have 2 white daisy. This is about 6 by 8, probably 6 by 7.5, or probably maybe 6 by 8.5. 6 by 8.5 pieces of paper. And they just live under my magic mat and they just add that little bit of extra. But on these types of thin cuts, I need to add extra. So you can add extra a little at a time by adding some more white daisy and or adding some colored paper. So the colored paper, you know that white daisy is thicker than the colored paper. And so adding, that much bulk, it's a lot easier to thin cut 2 pieces of paper using the colored paper. And then the 2 pieces of white daisy can be quite tricky. So for example, in these types of thin cuts, it doesn't make any sense to cut them 2 at a time because the bottom one won't come out. But let's see if this comes out any better, having an extra shim and a half in here for this. So we've got some extra paper, and I do have to punch out some of my shapes, but it shouldn't take too long. Now, again, adding that wax paper to this one would be helpful because there's a lot going on. But let's just see if adding that extra shim in there helped. Now it is going to make it harder to crank your machine. But I prefer it to be difficult to crank my machine than constantly having to punch out itsy bitsy little things. So now that I added that extra shim and a half, I have way fewer things. Here we go. My thing is a lot more punched out and they're popping right out, whereas these ones do not pop right out. So sometimes it's just a matter of adding an extra shim or two. And then adding that wax paper. Wax paper will help this problem of having, well, you can't even see. There are quite a few, maybe you can see on here. No, anyway, there's not too many on this one because I've done it recently, but adding the wax paper will help it not to stick so badly in your thin cut. So thank you so much for watching. Happy crafting.